will allow or create turbulence in our life and in our circumstance in order for us to pay closer attention.
Pastor Tony Evans has spent decades as one of the most influential and respected voices in modern Christianity, guiding millions through his sermons, books, and teachings on faith. That's why viewers were stunned when the longtime pastor became emotional during a church service and announced he was stepping away from ministry. The unexpected moment quickly sparked questions across the Christian community. What caused such a dramatic decision? And what could this mean for the future of his ministry, his church, and the legacy he built over nearly 50 years? The real reason Pastor Evans stepped away. Anthony Tyrone Evans Sr., better known as Pastor Tony Evans, is widely regarded as one of the most influential voices in modern Christianity. As a pastor, author, speaker, and radio broadcaster, his teachings have reached millions across the United States and around the world. For decades, he led Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, building it into a thriving ministry that continues to impact countless lives. Beyond the pulpit, Evans made history as the first African American to publish a complete Bible commentary and study Bible. His work in ministry, literature, and media positioned him as a trusted spiritual guide for many who turned to him for direction in both faith and life. What made Pastor Evans especially respected was not only his knowledge of Scripture, but his ability to communicate it in a way that felt real and relatable. His messages often reached people in their most vulnerable moments, offering clarity, conviction, and hope when they needed it most. Over time, he became more than just a pastor to many. He became a steady voice in seasons of uncertainty. However, everything took a shocking turn when news broke that he would be stepping away from his pastoral duties. The announcement came during a Sunday service at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship on June 9, 2024. What was expected to be a regular gathering quickly shifted into an emotional moment as Pastor Evans addressed the congregation directly. In his message, he emphasized that the foundation of his ministry had always been rooted in biblical truth and personal accountability. He then revealed that, years earlier, he had fallen short of those same standards in his personal life. While he clarified that no crime had been committed, he acknowledged that his actions were not consistent with the judgment he had always taught others to uphold. Because of this, he stated that he would be stepping away from his pastoral responsibilities and entering a season of restoration under church leadership. Following his announcement, the church confirmed that the decision was made after prayer, counsel, and discussions with the elders. They stressed that accountability applies to every leader, regardless of position, and that maintaining spiritual integrity remained their priority. Still, despite the official statements, many were left with one pressing question. How did one of the most respected pastors in the country end up making a decision that would pause nearly 5 decades of ministry? And to understand that, we need to look at how it all began for Tony Evans long before this moment ever arrived. The making of Pastor Tony Evans. Before Pastor Tony Evans became a globally recognized Christian leader, his beginnings were far more humble than most people realize. His story did not start with fame, influence, or large congregations. Instead, it began with a young man committed to his faith, steadily building a foundation that would later grow into one of the most impactful ministries in modern Christianity. Anthony Tyrone Evans Sr. first began gaining attention in the early 1970s while still studying at Dallas Theological Seminary. At the time, he was just 24 years old and still completing his Master of Theology degree. But even then, his voice carried something unique that would soon open unexpected doors. A radio opportunity came when a producer from Houston reached out looking for a preacher to fill airtime for a new broadcast. Evans was recommended by one of his professors, and that single recommendation became the turning point that launched his public ministry. He began recording sermons in a small campus studio, unaware that his voice would soon reach listeners far beyond what he could imagine. What started as a simple radio recording quickly grew into something much bigger. By 1976, Evans took a bold step of faith and founded Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, starting with just a small group of 10 members inside his home. There was no sign at the time that this small gathering would one day grow into a thriving megachurch with thousands of members. As his ministry expanded, so did his influence. In 1981, he established the Urban Alternative, an organization dedicated to spreading biblical teaching through media and outreach programs. What made this effort unique was how quickly his radio messages began gaining traction, first locally and then nationally. His late wife, Lois Evans, played a major role in this growth. She helped manage early distribution efforts by sending out sermon copies, ensuring that more people could access his teachings. Over time, the ministry expanded far beyond the United States, reaching audiences in more than 100 countries and broadcasting on over 1,000 radio stations. But Evans's influence wasn't limited to church ministry alone. He also served as chaplain for professional sports teams, including the Dallas Cowboys and Dallas Mavericks, and later taught at Dallas Theological Seminary, where he trained future ministry leaders. His speaking ability and leadership eventually earned him invitations to major national conferences, further expanding his reach. By the time the 1980s and 1990s arrived, Evans had already established himself as one of the most respected voices in Christian broadcasting. He published numerous books, delivered international sermons, and became widely recognized for his ability to connect Scripture with everyday life in a practical and powerful way. Over the years, his work would eventually lead to the creation of educational platforms, study materials, and globally distributed resources that continue to impact believers worldwide. Yet, despite all of this success, influence, and recognition, what happened later would still shock many who had followed his journey from the very beginning. Because behind this powerful legacy, there was still a deeply personal story unfolding within the Evans family. One that would soon draw attention not just to his ministry, but to the people closest to him. And that story begins with the Evans family itself, inside one of Christianity's most influential families. Behind Pastor Tony Evans's decades-long ministry is a family deeply shaped by faith, discipline, and purpose.
So rather than getting mad at God when there is turbulence, he says you better listen more carefully to God when there is turbulence.
At the center of that foundation was his late wife, Lois Evans, a woman widely known for her strength, wisdom, and unwavering support throughout their nearly 50-year marriage. Together, they built not only a home, but a spiritual legacy that continues to influence thousands today. Lois Evans was more than a pastor's wife. She was a partner in ministry, a leader in her own right, and a steady force within the Evans family. Together with Tony, she raised 4 children who would each go on to carve out their own paths while still carrying the values they were raised with. The family also grew to include grandchildren and great-grandchildren, forming a legacy that extended across generations. Their eldest daughter, Crystal Hurst, became a powerful voice in faith and personal development. A speaker, author, and worship leader, she built her own identity while continuing to reflect the spiritual foundation instilled by her parents. Through her writings and teachings, she often encourages others, especially women, to step into their purpose with confidence and faith. Her sister, Priscilla Scherer, also emerged as a well-known Bible teacher and speaker with a global following. She became widely recognized for her ability to break down Scripture in a way that connects deeply with everyday life. Despite her success, her journey has not been without challenges. At one point, she faced a serious medical situation involving surgery after doctors discovered a concerning growth in her lung. During that season, she leaned heavily on her faith, navigating fear and uncertainty with resilience and trust in God. The Evans family's influence also extends through Anthony Evans Jr., a Christian recording artist whose voice gained national attention after appearing on a major televised singing competition. Although he did not win, his performances opened doors in the music industry, allowing him to work with well-known artists while staying rooted in his spiritual message. The youngest sibling, Jonathan Evans, took a different path before ultimately returning to ministry. Once a professional football player in the NFL, he later transitioned into pastoral and mentorship roles. Today, he speaks to athletes, young leaders, and faith communities, blending his experience in sports with his spiritual calling. Each member of the Evans family has followed a unique journey, yet all remain connected by a shared foundation of faith and purpose. Their lives reflect different expressions of ministry, whether through preaching, teaching, music, or mentorship, but all point back to the values instilled by their parents. Even after the passing of Lois Evans in 2019, her influence continues to be deeply felt within the family. Her legacy lives on through her children's work, their ministries, and the impact they continue to have on people around the world. But just when it seemed like the Evans family story was one of strength, unity, and unwavering faith, a new chapter emerged, one that would bring unexpected attention and challenge the image many had long associated with Pastor Tony Evans. And that next moment begins with something no one saw coming. A personal announcement that shocked many. After years of grief following the passing of his longtime wife, Lois Evans, Pastor Tony Evans eventually stepped into a new and unexpected season of life. For many who had followed his journey closely, what came next was something they never anticipated. In September 2023, during a church gathering, Evans took a moment that was originally meant to honor the memory of his late wife. The atmosphere was reflective and emotional as he invited his family on stage to pay tribute to Lois and the life they had built together. But what happened next caught many completely off guard. In a surprising announcement, he revealed his engagement to Dr. Carla Crummy, a woman who shares both his faith and commitment to ministry. The moment marked a significant personal transition, signaling a new chapter after years of loss and reflection. Shortly after, Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship confirmed the news publicly, expressing joy over the announcement and support for the couple. The church described it as a celebration of love, faith, and companionship, noting that the union was grounded in shared purpose and spiritual alignment. The couple later held a private wedding ceremony attended only by close family and friends. While the event was kept intimate, the news quickly spread among church members and followers, sparking a mix of surprise, curiosity, and reflection. For many supporters, seeing Pastor Evans begin a new chapter brought a sense of healing after a long period of mourning. At the same time, it also marked a visible shift in his personal life, one that naturally drew public attention due to his long-standing legacy and influence. But while this moment represented renewal and transition, it was only one part of a much deeper and more complex story unfolding behind the scenes. Because what many didn't realize was that another chapter in the Evans family story was still unfolding, one that would carry both emotional weight and unexpected challenges. And that chapter begins with the legacy left behind by the woman who shaped so much of their foundation.
The heart behind the Evans family story.
Long before the recent headlines surrounding Pastor Tony Evans, there was one person whose presence shaped nearly every part of his life and ministry: his late wife, Lois Evans. For those who knew the Evans family story closely, Lois was never just a supporting figure. She was the foundation everything else was built upon. Lois Evans was known for her deep faith, quiet strength, and unwavering commitment to her family and ministry. Alongside Tony, she helped build not only a household, but a legacy that would go on to influence generations. Together, they raised 4 children, each of whom would eventually step into their own calling while carrying forward the values they were raised with. Born in Guyana in 1949, Lois grew up in a faith-centered environment where discipline, integrity, and devotion to God were part of everyday life. From a young age, she displayed a strong spiritual foundation, accepting Christ early in life and dedicating herself fully to ministry as she grew older. Even in her youth, Lois was full of energy and creativity. She loved music, learning, and serving others, often taking part in church activities and youth programs. Her passion for worship and service would later become a defining part of her life as she stepped into marriage and ministry alongside Tony Evans. When she met Tony in her late teens, their connection quickly grew through shared faith and purpose. That relationship eventually led to marriage in 1970, beginning a journey that would span nearly 5 decades. Together, they navigated the challenges of building a ministry from the ground up while raising a family and serving a growing congregation. Lois played a major role in the early development of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. She wasn't just present, she was active in shaping its foundation. From organizing church activities to supporting early ministry efforts, her involvement helped turn a small gathering into a growing spiritual community. Beyond the church, she also supported broader ministry efforts through writing, music, leadership roles, and mentoring other women in faith. Her influence extended quietly but powerfully, often behind the scenes, yet deeply felt by those around her. Even after years of service and public ministry work, she remained deeply devoted to her family. Her children often spoke about the values she instilled in them: faith, discipline, humility, and purpose. Principles that continue to guide their lives today. In 2019, the Evans family experienced a devastating loss when Lois passed away after a battle with cancer. Her passing marked the end of an era for the family, leaving a deep emotional void that was felt not only privately, but also within their wider ministry community. Tributes poured in from family members and followers alike, each reflecting the same truth. Lois Evans had been a cornerstone of strength, love, and spiritual grounding for everyone around her. But even in her absence, her influence never left. In many ways, everything that unfolds within the Evans family still traces back to the foundation she built. And yet, even with such a powerful legacy behind them, the family would soon face moments that tested their unity in ways no one expected. Because behind the public image of strength and faith, there were still personal struggles and revelations waiting to surface. And what comes next begins with how the Evans family responded when everything suddenly came into question. How the Evans family responded to the shock. When Pastor Tony Evans publicly announced his decision to step away from ministry, it immediately raised questions not only among followers, but also within his own family. While the church statement emphasized accountability and restoration, the personal response from those closest to him became a topic of intense public interest. Evans made it clear in his announcement that he had not committed any crime, and he implied that he had already shared his situation with his family. However, this detail was later clarified by his son, Jonathan Evans, who offered a different perspective during a public sermon. Speaking to his congregation, Jonathan addressed the situation directly, explaining that the family was informed shortly before the public announcement. According to him, his father shared only what had already been communicated to the church, without additional details. His comments added a new layer of complexity to the public understanding of the situation, showing that, even within the family, some aspects of the matter remained private. Despite the uncertainty, Jonathan spoke with strong faith and optimism. During his sermon, he emphasized trust in God's plan and confidence that his father's ministry journey was not over. He described the situation not as an ending, but as a temporary season, one that would eventually lead to restoration and return. His message emphasized resilience, choosing to focus less on the surrounding controversy and more on spiritual assurance. He reminded the congregation that challenges do not determine the final outcome, and that faith can remain steady even in moments of disruption and uncertainty. Other members of the Evans family appeared to reflect a similar perspective. With strong roots in ministry, Priscilla Shirer and Anthony Evans have also faced personal trials of their own, and their responses consistently highlight faith, endurance, and perseverance as guiding principles through life's difficulties and public challenges. Anthony Evans Jr., in particular, has previously spoken about the pressures of growing up in a well-known ministry family. He admitted that expectations often weighed heavily on him, especially with many people assuming he would automatically follow in his father's footsteps. At one point, he struggled privately with anxiety and emotional pressure, eventually reaching a breaking point during a live performance where he stepped away from the stage. Through time, therapy, and spiritual renewal, he eventually found healing and a renewed sense of purpose in his calling. His story became a reminder that even within strong spiritual families, personal struggles can exist behind the scenes. Over time, the Evans family continued to present a united front grounded in faith, even while facing public scrutiny, emotional challenges, and difficult moments that tested their resilience and commitment to staying together through adversity. And yet, despite their unity, one question still lingers in the background. Is this truly the end of Pastor Tony Evans's public ministry journey, or simply a pause before something unexpected unfolds once again? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Stay tuned for more powerful stories coming in the next upload.